last week. We having him on to start the week here on Sunday. My guy Suneil here with us, talking some 49ers football, targeting the NFL draft and free agency. Stay tuned with all the talk. We're going to be up next. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Rohan Chakravarthi show. I guess this is. I've got my guy Suneil. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man. I know we're going head to head with the Lakers Warriors, which right now
So
the Lakers are
I'll
up by
give
15.
you some trash talk when we end up winning by a good amount.
Right. Well, right now, Lakers are up by 15. So,
yeah.
We'll see. Well,
Probably
so for some reason, the Lakers have had
kept
the
my mouth
Warriors
shut
number
until I
this
saw the
season.
score.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting because obviously the Warriors are in the standings much higher than the Lakers, but for some reason, Lakers have had the Warriors number this season. So, moral
have
victories.
We played y'all at home a good amount, or because I know we are.
I think that this is the third. This is the third time they've played in the last, I feel like, week and a half, and the Lakers are 2-0.
Right,
and
the Lakers won. Yeah, the Lakers won that last one. They actually, I think they won the last two.
Yeah,
one of them was. I know one of them was at home, one on the road. Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting.
But real quick,
we're not here to talk basketball. We're here to talk football.
Do want to give a shout out here to Harold Murillo. Thank you for tuning in to the show. But yeah, like you said, not talking basketball. We talking some football today. 49er talk. We talked a little bit last week, spoke on John Lynch, the comments that John Lynch had, and I think that that's a good place to start because I want to start with a little bit of a heavier topic. Mike McGlinchey. John Lynch was very candid when he spoke about Mike McGlinchey last week. Talked about Mike McGlinchey's market, understanding that it's going to be heavy and that Mike McGlinchey likely outprices himself essentially out of the 49ers range. What did you think about the comments and really the frankness of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain instances where it just is what it is, right? I think most people who are reasonable about who Mike McGlinchey is, which, most of the 49er faithful isn't, right? A very small percentage of the 49er faithful actually give Mike McGlinchey the type of credit that he deserves. You and I both have mentioned, man, I think he's the top right tackle on the market as far as in free agency. So just like our team is looking for an upgrade at right tackle, most teams are looking for an upgrade at offensive line. And to most teams, they're going to look at Mike McGlinchey and look at, hey, this guy is better than who we have on our roster. So when it comes to that, price is always going to be a thing. And I think that the 49ers are looking to develop the next wave. They're in that kind of position right now, Rohan, where it's like they're willing to pay, I think, players that they feel like are going to be extremely productive for the next 3 to 4 years. They're willing to kind of not necessarily only overpay, but like at least be extremely competitive and make them the highest, paid at their position, right? They've done it with Trent Williams. They did that with Kittle. They did that with Warner. They did that with with Debo, to say that, kind of. And they're going to do that with Bosa. But a player like McGlinchey kind of fits where, yeah, he's going to be productive and all that kind of stuff, but is he worth making him the highest paid or close to the highest paid at that position? And I think he is on the other side of that, where they're like, okay, well, let's just get younger through the draft versus overpaying for a guy who doesn't fit that kind of elite kind of realm that they're willing to, go into that with. And that's why I think, they were candid and, more than likely McGlinchey is going to be too expensive for the 49ers. And I think that gives us some answers because we know that they're clearing up a lot of cap space. It's interesting to know now that, that isn't for McGlinchey.
Yeah. And I mean, when you talk about McGlinchey, it's an interesting case, right? Because you're right. Offensive tackle and offensive line in general, you're going to pay more likely than the player is worth because of the value of the position and also the age of the player. You specifically, I know you've talked about the importance of the offensive line and the desire to upgrade. What would you do?
So a year ago, Rohan, I would have said re-sign McGlinchey. And the reason for that is I didn't have much faith in the 49ers' ability to identify the right talent along the offensive line and develop them. However, with the emergence of Aaron Banks, that has changed my opinion of what the 49ers' ability to scout that offensive line is. So for me, I think that uh, you let him walk and you draft a guy, because I know guys like you, guys like Marco have been pretty adamant that there are solutions in this draft that are going to be available or near available to where the 49ers can either jump up to catch them, or guys that can fall to the 49ers that could might not be a day one upgrade, but could be that solution a year from today or a year from now or 2 years down the line type of thing. So I think you have to
Right.
go that.
Right. I mean, when you talk about rookies, the whole point of rookies, right, in general, normally, as interesting as it sounds, it is tough to find a day one upgrade in the draft. The point of drafting rookies is not only because of their floor, but it's more so because of the potential that they have. You have players that get grade out to be Pro Bowl players when they develop and enter an NFL system in 2 to 3 years, All Pro players. It's not necessarily that they're going to be that in year one. And so, especially when you talk about the later rounds, I think the 49ers, yeah, they're going to look to try and address the position. And a part of that is them potentially looking to get a guy in the third or fourth round. Now, does that guy start? It'll be intriguing because you'll have to beat up Colton McKivitz. But I've been a proponent of competition, and I think it's important, especially when you look to address the position. At some positions, the 49ers have done well in looking to address the position a year early so that they can go ahead and have a solution when the time comes. They didn't do it in a position like safety last year when they had opportunity at 93 to select a guy like Nick Cross or Kirby Joseph. It didn't do it at safety, but lucked out when Tashawn Gibson played well. But they did do it at left guard 2 years ago when they drafted Aaron Banks to succeed Laken Tomlinson. They've done it at certain positions. They should do it at right tackle if they believe that Colton McKivitz can be the guy, then guess what? You've got good competition. If not, then you've got a player that's better than what you already know Colton McKivitz is. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, they may have done that at center as well, right? I know you've been the biggest proponent of Zakil as possibly the solution there. I know
Right.
guys are, there's certain people that are high on Poe, and maybe he could be in that realm. I'm interested to see if what the 49ers solution there. I know Colton McKivitz is kind of the guy in the leader room in the locker, but it's going to be interesting because I think a guy like the 49ers, if there's guys available, right, like something like Trent Williams, right? I think Trent Williams was something that surprised everybody. Nobody realized that he was available, or he was available at the cost that the 49ers were willing to do. I think both you and I agree that I don't think the 49ers are going to utilize all their third round picks to actually pick players. They're going to package some of those picks this year and maybe next year to either move up in the draft or potentially go after a player. So I don't know if it's just interesting offseason, Rohan. There seems to be a lot of good players that are ending up being cap casualties for teams, or teams are looking for ways to decrease, their spending overall. So I don't know if there's players that you guys have identified that might be available, like because the team's cap situation, or they may have somebody on the roster already that could fill a void. But that was something that the 49ers did and got Trent Williams. I don't know if there's somebody else out there that they could kind of pick away. Who knows?
Right. And I mean, when you talk about those type of players, right, it is tough because cap casualties are just a part of the business. And that's why it is hard to insulate your roster very well on a year-to-year basis, especially when you're a top team, because you have to understand when you're a top team, there are going to be players that are playing better than what their salary indicates. And so, yeah, that's right. You talk about center. Center's an intriguing position. The 49ers, I have said, Nick Zakelj, they drafted him to be the center of the future. Now, will he be that? We don't know. We haven't seen him necessarily play in that environment. He has to get better in certain things like anchoring, like pass protection in general. But, it's been a year of development behind the scenes. How do we see that going? Jason Poe has been a guy who we've been intrigued about as well. Some other guys, when we talk about it, Jake Brendel had a solid year. And then the draft. I think that this draft is so deep that you could look to find center in this draft. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But this draft has a lot. This draft is very interesting at several positions. Doesn't seem like there are a lot of round one talents. Not a lot of top end talent, really, at many positions. That is, I mean, quarterback is significant, right? You know that there are going to be 4 quarterbacks likely selected in the first round. But apart from that, I don't know the many positions where there is real high end talent, but the mid round talent in the depth in some of these positions in the draft, specifically offensive line, like center, like tackle, at defensive end, as always. Even if you want to consider, I don't know, wide receiver, not that much, but those type of positions where the 49ers might have some needs, there are some deep classes. And so even if you believe you have your option, I think you've got to go and capitalize on getting the best player available, which comes from some of these positions.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that the 49ers staff and Adam Peters, has been kind of leading the charge in that. They do extremely well when it comes to picks 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round, getting the best player available and really adding that depth, right? You just look at in the last 2 years, the players that have come from, 4th round and below, very impactful players. You're talking about a guy like Talanoa Hufanga, who turned into an all-pro in 2 years. Samuel Womack, Diamador Lenore, Burford, who's a, week 1 starter for the 49ers. All of these players are, Elijah Mitchell. These are guys that were players that were best player available at a position. And now they're very impactful players on the team. That's one thing that I think allows the 49ers to maybe make some mistakes in free agency because they're so good at drafting and developing players that, you could let a guy like Jaquaski Tart walk. You could let a guy like K'Wan Williams walk. This year, most likely you're probably letting a guy like Jimmy Ward walk, and still able to maintain a level of excellence that the 49ers have been able to do over the past 4 seasons.
There we go. But no, I agree with you there in what you're saying about, the way the 49ers scouting department has been able to evaluate and the way that they go about their business. And I think it brings me to an interesting topic because you brought up Adam Peters, and there was a very insightful article from The Athletic's Matt Barrows, who does phenomenal work over there, obviously, talking to Adam Peters. And one thing that Barrows asked Peters about is, where is this draft deep at? Peter single-handedly pointed out the tight end group, and he also talked about the defensive line and the defensive tackle group, which indicates, are the 49ers looking to target there? What do you think about those positions? Should the 49ers look to not necessarily upgrade, because that's a tough word, right? To upgrade on where they have, but improve their units at 2 of the positions that are deep in the class? I can clarify that as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously defensive line, we know the 49ers are always going to pick 1 or 2 defensive linemen. That's just their MO, right? The start of this regime, they pick defensive line every single draft in the first round, with the exception of Mike McGlinchey, right? So we know that they're going to pick 1 or 2 defensive linemen, especially if guys that they really like fall to positions where they're already at. Tight end is interesting because obviously George Kittle, I think, had one like a bounce back season this year, and he played really, really well. Obviously, him and Purdy had a really great connection. I assume him and Lance will have a very good connection as well when they get a chance to start playing together. But he also is, he also is another player where you look at, okay, is his money going to match his production? And to me, yeah, but that doesn't mean that you don't look for a solution or actually look for another great tight end to add to the roster, because I think the 49ers are looking to utilize more 2 tight end sets, and a tight end 2 actually gets a lot of play and run for the 49ers. So if you can get another weapon at a tight end 2 position, I think it does wonders. Even with Kittle on the roster, there's another guy there that could pass, catch, and block for the 49ers when they do utilize 2 tight end sets. But also, if and when it gives you options when it comes to Kittle, if you want to go ahead and maybe trade him down the line, or God forbid he gets injured, or you decide that maybe it's time to just move on from him, kind of situation. So I definitely think that even without the tight end depth being there, like regardless of that, I think the 49ers were still going to draft a tight end this year, just because like you said, they're very good at drafting players for a year, 2 years down the line versus just for what they need right now this year.
Right. And I mean, tight end is another position where the 49ers have looked to kind of get a solution right in the past, but they also haven't diverted too many resources to it. I mean, they tried to go after Austin Hooper the year he signed with the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, $11 million is too stark a price. Drafted Charlie Warner, 5th round, has been all right. He's been a blocker, not too much more than that. Ross Dwelly has shown flashes as a pass catching tight end. He's a really good guy as a pass catcher, just didn't have the blocking prowess, and the 49ers want that in their 2 tight end sets. And I mean, other guys, Jordan Matthews, Jordan Reed, whoever you might want to consider it, some projects didn't end up working out. The 49ers have to address this position because NFL teams understand how valuable 2 good tight ends are in your system. When you have 2 tight ends, you get into that 12 or 22 personnel. It forces the defense to then have more linebackers, more guys in the front 7 on the field to combat your formation. And what does that mean? You got less guys covering the back end, more chances for you to stretch the ball downfield, and more chances for you to open up the playbook, which in Kyle Shanahan's hands is one of the best aspects of the 49ers offense. So if you have 2 guys that can block and catch, obviously not to the level that Kittle can, but enough to be a tight end number 2, which this draft has, guess what? You have ways that you can block certain things in the running game, be it with pulling tight ends, be it with the different formations the 49ers use and the different ways that they run the football. You also have guys that can stretch the field and create mismatches because those linebackers are going to cover those tight ends. And when you run different route combinations, you get mismatches. The 49ers already saw the mismatches that they can create with Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. Now imagine those guys incorporated alongside 2 tight ends that can do both sets of skills. It's what the 49ers have been looking for, and that's kind of been their goal over this past 2 year when they selected Trey Lance, when they've been doing these improvements. They're adding to the versatility of their offense, be it yards after catch people, or be it just prolific weapons. They're creating positionless football offensively, and it's really, really impacted their offense.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, once again, when Adam Peters is saying that, I think it's a good indication of what's going to happen for the 49ers in the draft.
I mean, exactly, right? It's right out of his mouth. It's right there. You have an indication that the 49ers are clearly looking at that position. And I'm pretty sure the 49ers have what do you call it? Had interviews with a good amount of tight ends in this class. The 49ers have looked, I know that they've looked. First of all, I want to give a shout out to the guys that went to the combine this week because they did a phenomenal job consistently providing us information on who the 49ers have talked to and things like that. Shout out to all those guys, Jordan Elliott, Brad Graham of the SF Niners, Steph Sanchez, obviously the 49K podcast. Shout out to all those guys, but we got a little bit of a look at who exactly the 49ers are looking at. Josh Wiley of Cincinnati, I know they talked to Braden Willis of Oklahoma, guys like Davis Allen of Clemson. And I mean, it's a variety of names, right? A variety of solid names, a variety of different skill sets. But 49ers are definitely looking at the position. Second part of Peters' comment, though, defensive line. 49ers have always looked to draft defensive line, and now they face reinforcements that they likely need to recover because Samson Ebukam and Charles Omenihu are free agents. What do you think about that type of the comment?
Yeah, I mean, so once again, I think a lot changes very quickly with where I think resources are going to be allocated for the 49ers. A few weeks ago, I was set that the 49ers are going to go all in on a defensive tackle, whether it was Daron Payne, if he was available, or Javon Hargrove from the Eagles. Now, I think I'm a little less confident that that's the route that they're going to go. I do think the 49ers are going to target a 3-down player because I think that they only have 2 right now along that defensive line in Bosa and Armstead. I think that they want another guy that they could play three downs, meaning can play in pass downs and run downs, right? Amena, who doesn't necessarily fit that mold. Like, he's more of a pass rusher, but isn't necessarily the strongest at run defense. So I kind of felt like he was going to walk regardless of some of the comments that were coming out. Do I think they only settle in the draft, though? I don't necessarily know that. I do think that they're going to pick up a
In
D
free
tackle.
agency.
And D tackle during the draft. I do think that they'll probably now look for an edge to complement Bosa in free agency, because I do think that there it's a little deeper than the defensive tackle market in free agency. So I think that once again, the 49ers are going to make that one splurge. I thought it was going to be between defensive tackle and safety, or possibly both. With Lynch talking about wanting to bring Gibson back, that makes me a little less confident that they're going to go after a splash signing for safety, because why would you bring
Right.
Gibson back if you're going to get a guy like Bates or Johnson Gardner, right? So I think that they'll probably go. I think they'll probably go edge in free agency. Make that one player, like they brought Moody Ward in last year. I think they bring an edge into it, and I think through the draft they're going to upgrade at safety and defensive tackle.
I think that that's fair, right? When you talk about it, because when you mention the defensive line, not only is this a deep defensive line class in general in the mid rounds, we saw a lot of the testing, so a lot of volatile rankings. I'm sure on teams' boards on who's rising, who's falling, who teams are targeting. San Francisco's also, when it comes to defensive line, they've also gone best player available in most of the drafts, right? I mean, Nick Bosa, albeit Solomon Thomas, Nick Bosa, they went best player available, trying to secure the trenches. But even recently, last year, defensive end was not necessarily the biggest need. They go after Drake Jackson in the first in with 61 because he was the best player on the board. So I think that you'll definitely see them at least draft one player. Now, the point you bring up about free agency is interesting. Samson Ebukam, we'll talk about him right after this. Apparently, reportedly commanding at least $10 million. Positive remarks around the combine, according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. And that definitely will price him out of San Francisco's range. I don't see them paying at least $10 million for him, given his production as a pass rusher. He's a very good defensive end in terms of the value he provides as a run defender, not necessarily as a pass rusher. And I think San Francisco is looking to target those 3-down guys, or guys that can be produce a little more off the edge in those situations. And so I think that he's a question mark. I don't know what they'll do with Charles Omenihu. I mean, he has his legal issue that he has to obviously figure out, but Charles Omenihu, I would not mind him being brought back if it comes at a reasonable price, given his age and also his pass rushing prowess. I think that that's the more important side. But I do think that they try and find some 3-down defensive linemen. I don't know if it'll be a splash signing. Payne obviously tagged. Hargrave likely to command 18 million or something like that on the open market. That's a lot for the 49ers at an age 30 player. We'll see who they look to go and get. Would be and I think that kind of tells you the direction that they go in the draft in terms of where they'll look to select a player and what kind of player they look to select.
Yeah, I thought the article was talking about Omenihu. You saying it was talking about Ebukam?
The Fowler one?
I'm not sure who wrote it, but where it was talking about the be commanding like 10 million in free agency.
I thought it was Ebukam. I
Okay.
thought it was Ebukam.
Yeah,
I could be
for
wrong.
some reason I read it Omenihu. So I don't know. Either one of them, I don't think either one of them come back actually. I think both of them are going to be too expensive. And once again, I think that the 49ers realize that. So, and maybe they don't realize, but I think I realize that just having a lot of depth doesn't necessarily help because
Uh-huh.
there's always going to be a weakness, and they need more guys that could do multiple things instead of just a lot of things, a lot of players that could do one thing good. I'd rather have more guys that could do both things well, right? And they don't
Right.
have a lot of that. They have two of those right now. So I think that like they identified, hey, we bring in a corner at the level of Mooney Ward, it's gonna solidify our, secondary, which obviously that did, and it obviously brought the level of play of all the guys. Mosley had his best season. Yamado Lenore had his best season. Obviously, those guys were getting more season, but I think Mooney Ward being there helps that them get the best out of them as well.
Right.
I think with what we've seen at Nick Bosa, who obviously is playing, all world level, right? He's an all pro defensive player of the year, but give him some help. I think you could tap into another level of what this defensive line is capable of. So that's why I think it's extremely important that the 49ers find a solution there. If they believe that Drake Jackson is that guy and he's already ready to be that guy, then okay, maybe not. I don't think necessarily they believe he is that guy quite yet. So I do think they go through free agency to get a guy, whether it be, a 1 year, 2 year type deal with a guy like Yannick Ngakoue, who's a little bit older, but can produce when has produced in the league, or if there's another guy out there that could be even longer or more of a solution, where I think they go after a guy like that.
I think it's interesting that you bring up Drake Jackson because Lynch also talked about Jackson. We talked a bit about him this past week, but he talked about Drake Jackson, and I'll push back a little bit here in that I thought that Drake Jackson, the way that Lynch talked about him this past week, indicated the 49ers kind of are in a position where they don't necessarily have a choice but to hope that Drake Jackson kind of develops this year. He said how the 49ers need a big time jump in year two for Drake Jackson and that they expect it to happen, meaning why? The 49ers divested such draft capital into him, understanding how their cap situation was going to go in future years, but also understanding kind of how they needed to handle things, right? Drafting 1 year earlier, understanding players are going to leave the year next. And so to me, I think that San Francisco might um, look to see Drake Jackson's role increase for sure in 2023. Now, again, that doesn't mean that they're out on players because the 49ers do like to have good depth and they do like to. I mean, I think three down players are valuable. And I don't know if Drake Jackson has proven that he'll be a solid three down player against the run if he hasn't. I don't know his weight right now, but the weight will certainly indicate that. So definitely an argument on both. I think argument can be said on both sides. Just interesting about Drake Jackson given Lynch's comments as well.
Sure. And I think if they don't go after a DN, then maybe they do see enough in him. But I do think that they want more three down players. And this is all feelings, no facts. I don't know that they want that necessarily. If I'm running the team, I definitely see that as a big weakness where the 49ers haven't had four three down players on the defensive line in quite some time. And they need that. At least
Yeah,
get three right now.
that's fair. That's definitely fair. That's definitely fair. Kind of moving forward. A topic that it seems like it was a little early, but we got to talk about it because it was also addressed Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa obviously had a extension talks are starting. It says according to John Lynch, seems like it's a little bit away. Kind of initial thoughts on Nick Bosa and his extension.
Yeah, it was interesting though because Lynch said it's away, but it didn't seem like he wanted it to be. He wanted it to get done. And that was interesting because obviously the 49ers are pretty consistent with when they make these extensions, and it's a day before training camp or the day that training camp starts, right? But this is the first indication where the 49ers or John Lynch is like, I wish it could get done earlier. And I don't know if it's not getting done earlier because of Bosa or if it's just the 49ers thought process of just getting it done at that for me, I think that it's time that I would actually like to see them get it done before free agency. And the reason for that is let's know what money we have to spend and so that you could go out there and get it done, right? Focus on this year versus focusing on next year. You know that Bosa is a guy that's going to get paid, broken off, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if there's, and it's not like there's other guys in his position that are hitting free agency as well that are like resetting the market, right? That there's not that competition, I think, at least as far as guys waiting. So I think you just get it done. That way you can actually utilize money against the cap. And I think it's interesting, Rohan, and you're obviously way better at the cap than I am. The cap's about to jump big time, I think, next year. I think it would be advantageous to get as many signings under the cap this year so that you have even more money for next year to go after free agents versus already kind of spending some of that money with guys from this year kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that you get it done early so that you can kind of know what to play with moving forward.
I think that this story is very interesting because I think it kind of does show how NFL negotiations happen. A lot of people are under the assumption that the 49ers are the issue, and I'm not going to deflect any blame on the players because I'm absolutely with them with the way that they conduct their business and getting the best deal possible. But it's a two-way street. I don't think that there's ever been a time where the team themselves want this deal to be done only in August. That's not the way that they handle these negotiations. But both teams are negotiating throughout this entire process, sending offers and counteroffers, trying to come to the number. But remember, it's not only the player and the team that are the factors, it's the other potential deals that are occurring. Because in the NFL, when one deal occurs, the next deal, it automatically puts the player who's getting the next deal at an advantage because you now have a new baseline that you could go depend on. And I think in Nick Bosa's favor, where he's looking to make the most money, it's in his best interest, if we're being honest, to wait. He doesn't have an issue because he doesn't necessarily need to be, he can demand what he wants. And if they don't meet the demands that he wants, he doesn't have an issue. He can hold out, not hold out, but he doesn't have to participate until training camp, really. And so I think it's in his best interest uh, to honestly wait. And that's where it's a part of it. It's in normally a player's best interest to wait until that time because other teams and other players also figure out those deals at those times. I think the 49ers have tried to get deals done early. I know they have with some of them, but also you have to understand the process, I think, goes both ways in that the player and the team need to agree to those numbers, and sometimes it's best interest in one side to wait.
Well, I understand that, but that's why I brought up like there's not really that many defensive ends he's competing with this year, right? When I think in the last years, obviously with Debo, there was a bunch of wide receivers around that same time. So I understand kind of holding out to kind of see where the money falls through. You saw with Fred Warner, there was the guy out of the Colts that was
Yeah.
uh, that was there. So it was like, okay, wait till the end. I think there's another one recently too that was similar, but I don't know who else is a defensive end that's looking to get broken off that is even in the same realm as Nick Bosa. I don't know. That's why I think that in this situation you can actually get it done because I don't think there's another guy like Nick Bosa out there right now. So I
Right.
mean, what about just like let's just say, in theory, if they could get it done right now, right, and let's say it's a number that makes sense for Bosa, what would be the advantages of getting it done early versus getting it done late?
The advantages, I think you get more understanding of the cap situation for next year later on. That's an advantage for the team. As for Bosa, I think it's more so. I mean, I think it's not necessarily there's advantage necessarily, but
Well, let's just focus
you
on it
want
from a
to.
team perspective. From a team's perspective, what would
I
be
mean, the
the
team
advantages?
perspective, it's clearly the advantage is you understand where you are heading into free agency. I think that's pretty clear, and I think that money wise, I think the 49ers, like it's really down to how does the contract get structured, because the 49ers are going to be, I think this one's going to be one of the more creative ones that we see, because you have to understand how signing bonuses are working and option bonuses work. The 49ers, I think, to put themselves in the best cap situation possible over the next few years to make themselves expendable is not necessarily diverting as much money to Nick Bosa as signing bonuses, but instead creating these different bonuses that are essentially guaranteed, but have these cap hit maneuvers that the 49ers can integrate. And I think that the complexity of the deal is what might hold it up. The other thing is, I think Jeffrey Simmons of the Tennessee Titans is going to look for a deal. He's an interior guy, I know, but you could look at them in the category. I mean, if it's up to me, I think the best situation is getting a deal done before March 16th. Why? You know how much Nick Bosa's cap hit is going to be lowered for 2023. That piles with the other restructures that should happen, give the 49ers a clear amount of what their salary cap is going to be in 2023 to where they can go out and sign free agents. I just think that the process between the two teams normally takes longer because of the
Right.
amount of proposals that occur. And so that's where it just becomes tough. And I don't think this is just a 49er thing. I think you see this with several other teams in the NFL. You pointed out some of the examples. I think a lot of these deals carry out into the April, into the May situation,
Yeah.
because both sides are trying to get the best deal possible.
Yeah, I just think there should be a little more urgency from the 49ers this to get guys like, and even a guy like Ayuk, maybe even getting him extended, even though you have the 5th-year option for him. And the reason for that, like I said, what makes it a unique situation is there usually isn't as big of a jump in cap space as there is going to be from this year to next year, right? And so if you can lower cap hits for 2023, that is going to help a lot, because obviously in 2024, because the cap is going up so much, it doesn't matter if their cap hit goes up more in 2024, if that makes sense.
I get what you mean. I think I get what you mean. Yeah, and I mean, like I said, it's a tough ordeal for
Yeah.
sure.
Because
And the
because the
49ers,
problem becomes if you do it after free agency, then you don't really get to utilize the
that
cap space
extra
that
$9 million that you'll likely, or $8 million that you get,
right.
yeah, you don't get to utilize that. And I'm sure the 49ers have the contingency plan where that is. And I do think that when we talk about the urgency, I know Debo Samuel and his camp ran some documentary last year, really detailing the process. The 49ers, as surprising as it was, I mean, we heard the Debo Samuel trade request and all that. But his agent said in that meeting, the first offer the 49ers gave was actually much better than they anticipated in terms of lowballing. Seems like they gave a reasonable offer there. I wonder what they do. I don't think they mess around with Bosa, but I
Right.
wonder how that deal ends up happening. I mean, we've heard already Bosa talk and him being excited about next year. I don't think that there's going to be many issues with this deal necessarily, but I do think that I don't know exactly if the timeline is going to be as short as we want, which is
Right.
unfortunate.
Yeah, it was just interesting that John Lynch mentioned it, right? Because usually they
Yeah.
don't talk about how quick they want to get it done, or hey, we want to get it done as early kind of thing. Usually they're like, hey, be patient, we'll take care of them. We take care of our guys. This one, he's like, I wish we could get it done, now, kind of thing.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I do think that that's fair. Going back to what Peter said, um, it was an interesting conversation that he had with Barrows, and he spoke about, I believe he spoke about, oh, yeah, he spoke about Steve Wilkes, and he spoke about, I think that the notion right now is that the 49ers are going to run a very similar defensive system. Lynch talked about it as well during his press conference. What do you think about that, knowing Wilkes' background?
Yeah, I mean, I think he runs more zone than what
We've
what
done in the past?
well, just more recently under D'Amico Ryans, right? I think D'Amico Ryans is pretty aggressive and like playing man and type of situation where I think Sala was more kind of cover three, the zone type of stuff. So maybe it's going to look more like when Sala was here. I think the benefits though are I expect our secondary to take a jump with Wilkes' expertise being the secondary, and I think Wilkes is going to maybe help give a little bit more packages when it comes to trying to get pressure, right? I think he's a little more, how do you say, like, I guess creative when it comes to like the blitz packages and things like that. So I could see a little bit more of that, but yeah, I mean, I think scheme wise, or at least like, yeah, it's still going to look similar, but I do think there's going to be some wrinkles that are going to be added because of Wilkes and, what his tendencies are.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think you do value what Wilkes does best, and I think that definitely has to play a role for sure. But I also think that you understand how important the system has been as of late for the 49ers, and I think that that's also another important part. So there are the two sides to it for sure. And I think, yeah, I mean, it's a small topic, but I'm very interested to see the initial parts of it during training camp. How does the defense work? But one other thing, want to move on before we hit the last topics of the day. Robbie Gould. I mean, we heard the news. It's confirmed. I know I've anticipated this for a minute because I didn't think that when Gould actually was I didn't think they were gonna franchise tag him. And if we're being honest, Robbie Gould has not wanted to been here for a minute. His family lives in Chicago. What did you think about that move? Or not necessarily the move, but the news that you heard.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. To steal a quote from Nick Diaz, I'm not surprised. I think it's time for Robbie Gould to go off and find wherever his next team is. Paying $5 million to a kicker, I think, where it is a place where the 49ers can save some money. Robbie Gould has been clutch for the 49ers in the playoffs and done an amazing job while he's been here. I don't necessarily think, though, that he can't be replaced, right? I don't know if his level of play necessarily was irreplaceable. Obviously, playoff wise, he's been clutch, but through the regular season, he has missed kicks. He has missed some extra points. He has missed playing time as well. So, yeah, I think it's time to get younger. I think it's time to get cheaper at that position. I'm a big fan of, drafting Jake Moody. If that, I think that would be a great solution for the 49ers. Or there's a bunch of kickers that are always available, and teams find solutions with kickers that are just in street clothes right now, kind of just waiting for their next opportunity. So I think it's smart. You could save probably 3 million, 4 million a year, and allot that to more positions of need along the defensive line, along the offensive line, wherever they need to allocate those resources.
Right. I mean, yesterday I wrote an article about it. Robbie Gould. It's an interesting guy. Great human, right? And I mean, a great person to be around the organization, a great leader in general. But if we're being honest, Robbie Gould is not a top 5 kicker in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
In the regular season, he's not. The last 3 years, Gould has kicked, I think, I wrote about it yesterday. Gould's made like 82% of his field goals in the last 3 years, or in the last 4 since 2019. On top of that, 43% of his kickoffs, 43% are touchbacks. The number one issue with the 49ers and their special teams, you're allowing the opponent to return the kick, which then gives them the ball at the 35 yard line rather than the 25 yard line. You're allowing them to get that extra yards, and that's where some of the special teams issues have happened. So when you talk about it, not too great in the regular season, doesn't kick beyond 50 yards very often, doesn't kick the touchbacks. But again, what is Robbie Gould's number one talent? Kicking in the postseason. He's 29 for 29. He's good as gold. He's good as gold in the postseason because that's what he does. But when you talk about paying $5 million in the salary cap crunch that the 49ers have right now, it doesn't make sense for the 49ers necessarily to retain him. It's just too steep a price, understanding that since it's a 1-year deal, it's tough to maneuver the contract to where you can extend the cap hit over multiple years. I think that that's a big thing. And the more important part, Robbie Gould, his family does not live here. He's been living in a hotel, I believe, for the last 6 years because his family lives in Chicago. I think he's himself. He was the one who said to Adam Schefter he's going to test free agency and not return. It's because he himself is understanding, probably wants to go near the Midwest again. So we'll see what happens there. But don't necessarily think that it would have been the best move for both sides. Good on Robbie Gould for figuring out what's best for himself. 49ers now got to look elsewhere. Draft. John Lynch himself said it. He acknowledged they're looking at some players in the draft.
Jake Moody time.
Jake Moody time. That's funny. Harold Murillo says, "Don't waste a high draft pick on a running back this year. Would you draft another running back in at all in this draft? I don't care about high or low. Do you think they should? With 10,
I think they'll
10
bring
picks they have?
in. I don't know if they'll draft a running back. Possibly. I think they definitely bring in some running backs, whether it be undrafted or low picks. But CMC has solidified their running back room. Elijah Mitchell obviously can't stay healthy, but is a good 1-2 punch with CMC. I think Mason makes the team again. They obviously still have TDP. I don't know how many resources they allocate towards running back because I don't think they're carrying 5. So it's just going to be more training camp bodies, practice squad bodies. I don't know if they use draft picks for that. I think they would more likely probably just bring in undrafted free agents, which they've had a lot of success with. Obviously, Mason was an undrafted free agent that made the roster. So I think they go more that route. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't pick any running backs through the draft.
I wouldn't either, but I also would not be surprised if they did. The reason being, this draft class, it seems like it's pretty solid at running back in the later rounds. I do think that there are a good amount of talents there that you can get for the running back position. And so to me, would not be surprised if they go ahead and address the position with a later pick, understanding you have 10 picks in this draft. 10 likely don't make the roster, and you can just have them battle it out at the position itself. And so would not be surprised if they go for running back. We'll see if they end up doing it, but there are a couple of intriguing options. I think they could look for some speed guys, right? Understanding how their team is right now constructed at the position. And as it looks, you've got Mitchell, you've got CMC, you've got Mason, you've got TDP. The 49ers carried 5 last year, but they also normally carry one of the practice squad. So, you could look to see the guy fight for a 53-man spot or a practice squad spot at the position. We'll see what they do. But would not be surprised if they go ahead and address the position in the draft again, understanding their love for the position and also solid enough class in the back end.
I think out of running backs, they probably select a fullback maybe over
They could.
a halfback.
I could see that. Yeah.
How much longer is Juszczyk going to be Juszczyk? I don't know. So that might be interesting because I do think there's some fullbacks that are in this class that are worthy of being drafted. So maybe go that route rather than a halfback. Because I don't know if they carry. They don't usually carry 5 running backs, right?
They normally carry 4.
Plus,
yeah, last year it was because of
Juszczyk.
Mason they carried 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, look, for some reason Shanahan likes picking running backs, and if it is, it's probably going to be in the 3rd round. So we shall see, but hopefully they utilize those resources to other positions.
We're talking about priorities. I like Harold's next question. Opinions, 49ers may draft a tight end. We talked about that. Possibly a running back. Just talked about that. What should be the priority in terms of positions? What do you think? It's the title of the video. What positions are the 49ers targeting? What do you think are the priorities?
Yeah, so as far as when I'm thinking priorities, I'm thinking find a solution at these positions that are going to be viable players for next season. Not this season, but next season. So that's what I'm looking at as priority because I don't know if they have the draft capital to find somebody that can just jump in this year and be a full-time starter. So there's 3 positions that I'm looking for solutions that are going to be bona fide starters next season. That's at right tackle, that's at safety, and that's at defensive tackle. So those, I think, are the 3 positions that the 49ers need to make sure they hit on to continue the type of success that they've been having as far as with their draft pick. So those are the ones. Now, when it comes to what I think their priority is going to be with their first pick, my guess right now is if they don't pick in the 3rd round, like if they package those picks to move up in the 2nd round, it's going to be for a right tackle. If they stay where they're at, I think they actually probably draft a corner with their first pick.
Interesting. I like it.
I think there's a lot of
the new topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good corners that are going to be there at 99. And I think that with the emergence of Lenore, obviously with Mooney there, uh, with also Womack playing the way that he is, but also just the injuries that have happened in the
Right.
secondary for the 49ers. Stockpiling good corners, I think, is something that the 49ers are looking at. Cornerbacks and quarterbacks, I think, are the two positions that the 49ers can never have enough of.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. And I mean, when you talk about those positions, for me, I'll probably go a different way in terms of priorities. I like the right tackle thing. I've been an advocate for trading up in the second round. I think that there are talents in the second round that you can get. Now, with the draft being a little more deeper at certain positions than I initially expected, I don't know the possibility. I think the possibility that I've thought about that has somewhat diminished. Although I still would do it if there is that talent. I'm a BPA guy. I go best player available. I don't necessarily value the need as much. Why? Because when you prioritize need, you end up you tend to overdraft and you tend to not necessarily make the best picks. And the 49ers have had those issues before. So to me, I think it's got to be best player available, and it's tough to navigate in the third round, understanding where the 49ers are. But I think tackle is important. I also would be intrigued if they go for that tight end position. I think that there will be value in that third round, fourth round that they could go for in that for tight end. The position that you brought up as corner, I'm going to go with safety. I honestly think it makes more sense to draft a safety this year than before with the Deshaun Gibson news that he likely is returning to the 49ers, John Lynch said. And the reason is you brought up the right philosophy, looking to draft a year ahead. The 49ers made the big mistake last year. They didn't. They had Nick Cross in their hands, they had Kirby Joseph in their hands, and they ended up going with Ty Davis Price, who hasn't been a good player, who just hasn't been a good player. He didn't crack the rotation this year. I think they've got to go with safety this year, understanding the value of the position and also understanding that you have the chance to let a guy develop. Have him see the field in some three safety sets, but let him develop behind Tashawn Gibson and potentially take over with two really good players there in that secondary in Tashawn Gibson and Talanoa Hufanga. So to me, that's the route that I'd go. I think that I would look to target safety in this class, but I think interior offensive lineman is also an intriguing position that with the value on the board, I do think that they should go ahead and address that position as well. Be it guard or be it center, I think there are talents at both places and versatile talents as well at both places.
So if you had to put your money way too early on what the 49ers do with their first pick of the draft, what position group do you think it is?
I'd go tackle. Probably would go tackle. I think that understanding like that tackle is a position that you normally look to overdraft, and that I know the 49ers have been interested in certain players at the tackle position. I'd probably go tackle.
What if they stay at 99?
I still think tackle is a position that you can get at 99. I mean, Blake Freeland out of BYU's there. Wanya Morris could be there. I think that a couple of guys who you might see as a guard that could flex out to tackle would be there as well. I think that tackle would be a position. I still wouldn't mind drafting at 99 if they stay put.
Interesting. Go.
Harold Murillo talks about the new NFL report cards. I think the 49ers ranked 7th, with the one category being the training room because it's like it was like too small or too not spacious. What do you talk about it?
Yeah, I think you just hit it on the head. Overall, it seemed like the 49ers have done really, really good. All the culture type stuff seems to be 49ers do really well at. Look, it looks like the training room needs to be overhauled, and if that could lead to keeping players healthier longer, I'm all for it. So York, put some money into that training room. Let's get that up to A quality, and I'm sure it'll pay dividends as far as keeping the team healthier with a better training room. So that's all I can say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more so good than bad that you see them ranked so high compared to some of the responses you heard from some of the teams down at the bottom. So it's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing that they think ownership can spend and all that. Pretty positive morale, I'd say, in that locker room. Suneil, though, a question for you. Percent chance McGlinchey comes back. What are you thinking at the moment?
2% chance.
Oh, I thought you were saying like 2 out of 10. No, 2%. Okay, there we go. two
I don't
percent
think
chance.
I think there's 98% chance that McGlinchey is elsewhere come day one of free agency.
Yeah, no, I think that probably around the same boat if we being honest. But that's a good way to end today's show. 49ers throwback says I gotta go to Chicago. Funny enough, I'm going to Chicago actually next week. Big Ten tournament. Gonna be able there, be downtown and covering that. So that should be fun. But Sunil, I do want to appreciate your time. Thank you for obviously coming on the show and a fun weekend episode today.
Absolutely, Rohan. Always great to talk shop with you, my guy.
Yeah, real quick, I do want to see if I'm winning so I can talk some smack before. Oh, it's tied. Okay. Or 55-54. So, hey, we came back. You guys love to blow leads. Ooh, beautiful second quarter for the Warriors. But nah, I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk soon, man.